Hello everyone, tonight I've got 3 special scary stories for all of you. So before that, make sure to like the video and subscribe to Creepy Sinister, and don't forget to comment below and tell me where you're from and what time you're watching. Now get comfortable and let's begin. Story 1. This happened during a week of house sitting for my aunt. Everyone was afraid of what was outside, but my fear came from inside my own house. I was 24 at the time, living in a small apartment in Aurora, and my aunt lived about 20 minutes away in Naperville. She had a quiet split-level home tucked into a cul-de-sac where nothing ever seemed to happen. She asked me to stay there while she visited family out of state, mostly to keep an eye on the place and bring in mail. I didn't think twice about it. Free house, quiet neighborhood, and a change of scenery sounded nice. The first night felt strange right away. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet where you start noticing things you normally wouldn't. The hum of the refrigerator sounded louder. The ticking of the wall clock in the hallway seemed constant. Outside, the streetlights cast long shadows across the front yard, and every now and then, headlights would pass at the end of the cul-de-sac and fade away. I went through my usual routine. I locked all the doors, checked the windows, and made sure the garage door was shut. My aunt was very particular about security and had shown me everything before she left. She even joked about how many locks the front door had. There were 2 deadbolts, one above the handle and one below, plus the handle lock itself. I remember twisting each one and hearing the solid click, feeling reassured by the sound. I settled in on the couch with my laptop, watching random videos to kill time. Around 10:30 p.m. I started feeling tired, but I didn't want to go to bed yet. The house felt different upstairs, darker somehow, even with the lights on. The split-level design meant the bedrooms were up a short staircase, and I kept glancing toward it, half expecting something to move. By 11:45 p.m., I finally turned off the TV and got up to do one last check. I walked through the house, flipping off lights and making sure everything was still locked. When I got to the front door, I rested my hand on the deadbolts again, just to be sure. Both were tight. I remember thinking I was being paranoid, then heading toward the hallway that led to the stairs. I was halfway down the hall when I heard it, a soft click from the front door. Not loud, not sudden, just the kind of sound you'd hear if someone gently tried the knob to see if it would turn. I stopped walking and stood there, my heart starting to beat faster. I told myself it was the house settling, even though I knew that didn't make sense. A few seconds passed and then I heard it again. This time there was no mistaking it, the sound of metal shifting, slow and careful. I took a step closer to the living room, my eyes locked on the front door. That's when I saw it. The lower deadbolt was turning, not fast, not forced. It was rotating like someone on the other side had all the time in the world. I froze in the hallway, staring at it, trying to understand what I was seeing. My brain refused to catch up. I remember thinking maybe my aunt had some kind of automatic lock system I didn't know about, but even as I thought it, I knew it wasn't true. She hated anything complicated. Everything in that house was simple and old-fashioned. The deadbolt completed its turn with a soft, final click. The door didn't open right away. Whoever was on the other side seemed to pause, like they were listening. I realized I wasn't breathing and forced myself to take a shallow breath, terrified the sound would carry through the door. My hands felt numb and my legs felt weak, like they might give out if I moved. I backed away slowly, careful not to make a sound. The hallway felt longer than it had before, the carpet muffling my steps as I retreated. I didn't take my eyes off the front door until the corner blocked my view. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, and my thoughts were racing in circles. I ducked into the bathroom and quietly locked the door, leaning against it as if that would somehow help. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and considered calling the police. My finger hovered over the screen, but I hesitated. What would I say? That I saw a lock turn, that someone might have a key? I was afraid they wouldn't take it seriously, afraid they'd say it was probably nothing. That's when I heard the front door open. The sound was subtle but unmistakable. The gentle creak of the hinges, followed by the faint thud of the door closing again. Whoever it was didn't slam it or rush in. They moved like they were familiar with the space, like they knew exactly where they were. I held my breath, listening, trying to pick up any other noise. Footsteps followed, slow, measured steps on the hardwood floor. They didn't head toward the living room or kitchen right away. Instead, they paused near the entryway, right where the hallway began. I imagined them standing there, looking down the same hall I had just backed away through, maybe listening for me. I finally called 911, whispering into the phone and telling the operator that someone had just unlocked the front door of the house I was in. My voice shook as I gave the address and explained that I was hiding in the bathroom. The operator told me to stay quiet and stay where I was, that officers were on the way. She asked if I could hear the intruder, and I said yes. The footsteps started again, moving slowly through the living room. I heard drawers opening in the kitchen, cabinets being checked. It didn't sound frantic or messy. It sounded deliberate, like they were looking for something specific. Every sound made my stomach twist tighter, and I pressed myself harder against the bathroom door, wishing it could disappear. At one point, the footsteps came closer to the hallway. They stopped just outside the bathroom. I could see the shadow of someone's feet under the door, angled slightly toward it. They stood there for what felt like forever. I was convinced they could hear my breathing, that they knew exactly where I was hiding. The door handle jiggled once, just a small test like the one I had heard at the front door. When it didn't move, the footsteps retreated. I almost cried from relief, covering my mouth to keep the sound in. I heard them go up the stairs, the steps creaking softly under their weight. Minutes dragged by. I stayed on the phone with the operator, barely responding, just listening. From upstairs came the sound of a bedroom door opening, then another. I realized with a sinking feeling that they were checking rooms, maybe even the one my aunt had told me to sleep in. I wondered what would happen if they came back down. Eventually, distant sirens cut through the silence. The footsteps upstairs stopped abruptly. I heard hurried movement, then the sound of the back door opening and closing. The operator told me officers were arriving and to stay put until they came to me. I didn't move until there was a firm knock on the bathroom door and a voice identifying themselves as police. They searched the house and the yard but didn't find anyone. There were no signs of forced entry. The front door was unlocked, the lower deadbolt turned just like I had seen. When I told them what happened, one of the officers frowned and asked if anyone else had a key. I told him only my aunt, as far as I knew. That's when it got worse. The next morning, after I finally slept a few hours with every light on, my aunt called to check in. I told her everything. There was a long pause on the line before she spoke. She told me she had recently noticed a spare key missing from the kitchen drawer. She thought she had just misplaced it and hadn't mentioned it because she didn't want to worry me. She also told me something else she hadn't thought was important. A few weeks earlier, she had hired a local handyman to fix a loose railing by the stairs. He'd been in and out of the house for a few days while she was at work. She never saw him take anything, but she couldn't be sure. The police followed up, but nothing ever came of it. I didn't stay another night in that house. I packed my things and went back to my apartment, even though my aunt insisted she'd change the locks. For weeks afterward, I jumped at every sound in my own place. I kept checking my door locks, sometimes standing there longer than necessary, just listening. What still keeps me up at night isn't just that someone came into the house. It's how calm they were, how slow they moved, how they knew exactly where to go. Sometimes I think about that second deadbolt turning while I stood there watching it, and I wonder how many times that same key had already been used before I ever noticed. Story 2. It was the first night in a rental house near the beach in Galveston, Texas, I spent completely alone. I thought the silence would be peaceful, until I realized it wasn't silence at all. I was 17 at the time, and my parents had rented the house for the summer while my dad worked a short contract nearby. It was a narrow, two-story place with pale siding and wide windows that faced the street and the water beyond it. The house always smelled faintly like salt and old wood, especially at night when the air got heavy. My parents told me they'd be gone for just 2 hours to have dinner with friends, and I promised I'd lock everything and stay inside. They made a big deal about the rules before they left. No friends over, no opening the door for anyone, and don't use the landline unless it's an emergency. We never used that phone anyway. Everyone in the house had a cell phone, and the landline just sat on the kitchen wall like a decoration from another decade. After they left, I double-checked the locks like I said I would. Front door, back door, the little sliding door that led to the deck, all locked tight. I turned on a couple of lamps downstairs so the place didn't feel so empty, then settled on the couch with the TV on low. The sound of waves outside mixed with the hum of the air conditioner, and it actually felt kind of relaxing at first. About half an hour passed, and I started to feel that weird awareness you get when you're alone in a quiet house. Every small sound stands out. The fridge kicked on and made me jump. The house creaked as it cooled down, and I told myself it was normal. This place was old, and old houses make noise. I checked my phone and saw it was just after 9 p.m. I figured my parents would be back before I knew it. I muted the TV and went into the kitchen to grab a soda, trying not to think about how dark the upstairs hallway looked from the bottom of the stairs. The second floor didn't have any lights on, and the shadows up there felt thick. That's when the landline rang. The sound was so sudden and loud that I froze with the fridge door still open. The ringing echoed through the kitchen in a way my cell phone never did. It felt wrong, like something that wasn't supposed to happen. I just stood there staring at the phone on the wall as it rang again. My first thought was that it had to be my parents. Maybe their phones died or they forgot something. Still, I hesitated before answering because nobody ever called that number. After a few rings, I picked it up and held it away from my ear for a second, like it might bite me. I said hello, trying to sound normal. There was a brief pause and then a woman spoke. Her voice was calm and soft, almost bored. She asked, "Have you checked on the kids upstairs?" I didn't understand what she meant at first. I laughed a little, thinking it had to be a wrong number. I told her there were no kids here and that I was the only one home. As soon as I said that, the line went completely quiet. I pulled the phone away from my ear and looked at it, confused. I thought maybe the call dropped. Then I heard her breathing, slow and steady, like she was still there but choosing not to speak. It made my skin crawl. I asked who she was, and again there was nothing. No answer, no hang-up tone, just silence on the line. After a few seconds, I hung up and stood there staring at the phone, my heart beating harder than it should have. I told myself it was just a prank or a wrong number. Galveston gets a lot of tourists and people dial the wrong numbers all the time. Still, I locked the phone back onto the receiver a little harder than necessary and went back to the living room. I turned the TV volume up, but it didn't really help. A few minutes later, the phone rang again. This time I didn't jump, I just felt a slow wave of dread wash over me. I stared at the hallway, half expecting to see someone standing there. When nothing happened, I forced myself to walk back into the kitchen and answer the phone. Before I could say anything, the woman spoke again. She asked the same question, word for word, like she was reading from a script. "Have you checked on the kids upstairs?" My mouth went dry. I told her again that there were no kids and that she had the wrong house. She was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Are you sure you locked the back door?" That's when I felt real fear for the first time that night. I hadn't mentioned doors or being alone. I demanded to know who she was and how she got this number. She didn't answer. Instead, she let out a small breath that almost sounded like a sigh. I hung up without saying anything else. My hands were shaking and I wiped them on my shorts, trying to calm down. I grabbed my phone and checked the time. It was just after 9:30 p.m. and my parents were still gone. I walked to the back of the house and checked the door again, even though I knew it was locked. The handle didn't budge. The deck outside was empty, lit only by a weak porch light that flickered in the breeze. Everything looked normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. The phone rang a third time. I didn't answer it right away. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, listening to it ring, counting each one. On the fifth ring, I picked it up and didn't say hello. I just listened. The woman spoke again, and this time her voice sounded closer somehow, like she was enjoying this. She said, "You should really check upstairs." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I told her to stop calling and that I was calling the police. She laughed quietly, not like a joke, but like I'd said something she found amusing. Then she said, "They won't get there in time." I hung up and immediately dialed 911 on my cell phone. I told the operator that someone kept calling my house and asking strange questions and that I was home alone. The operator asked if anyone had tried to get inside. I told her no, not that I knew of. She said they would send a patrol car to drive by, but it might take a bit since nothing had actually happened yet. She told me to stay inside and keep the doors locked. When I ended the call, I didn't feel any better. The house felt different now. Every shadow seemed deeper, and the upstairs felt like it was pressing down on me. I tried calling my parents, but it went straight to voicemail. I left a shaky message telling them to come home right away. The landline rang again. This time I didn't answer it at all. I unplugged it from the wall and set it on the counter, telling myself that was the end of it. I stayed in the living room, sitting on the couch with my phone in my hand, staring at the stairs. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It just said, "Why aren't you answering?" My heart dropped. I hadn't given my cell number to anyone. I typed back, asking who this was, but before I could send it, another message came through. "I can see you from here." I looked up toward the front windows without thinking. The blinds were half open, and beyond them was the dark street and the faint glow from a streetlight. For a second I thought I saw movement near the side of the house, but when I focused, there was nothing there. My phone rang again, this time from the unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. The woman didn't waste time. She said, "You shouldn't stand by the window like that." I slowly backed away from the glass, my legs feeling weak. I asked her where she was, my voice barely steady. She didn't answer directly. She just said, "The kids are getting restless." I realized then that she wasn't confused. She wasn't mistaken about the house. She was saying those things on purpose. It felt like a game to her. I heard a noise upstairs. It was soft, like a footstep or a floorboard shifting. I froze, staring at the ceiling. The woman stayed silent on the phone, like she was waiting for me to hear it too. I whispered that I was calling the police again. She finally hung up. I ran to the front door and locked the deadbolt again, even though it was already locked. I grabbed the biggest flashlight we had and aimed it up the stairs. I didn't go up there. I couldn't. I stayed at the bottom, listening. Another sound came from upstairs, closer this time. It sounded like a door opening slowly. I backed toward the kitchen, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. Red and blue lights flashed through the front windows a moment later. A police car pulled up, and I almost collapsed with relief. I ran outside as soon as the officer stepped out, babbling about the calls and the noises. They searched the house, including the upstairs. They found nothing. No open doors, no broken windows, no one hiding. One of the officers asked if I was sure someone hadn't been messing with me from outside. I didn't know how to answer that. Before they left, one officer asked about the landline. I told him I unplugged it. He looked at the phone on the counter and frowned. He said it didn't matter because the line had been cut outside the house hours ago due to construction down the street. My parents came home not long after that, and I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, we found footprints in the sand beneath the upstairs window, right below my bedroom. They were gone by the afternoon, washed away by the tide. We moved out of that rental early. I still think about the last thing the woman said sometimes, and how she knew exactly where I was standing. Even now, years later, I keep my blinds closed at night, because every so often, when the house is quiet, I swear I can hear a phone ringing somewhere that shouldn't be ringing at all. Story 3. Back in Koreatown, Los Angeles, I worked the night shift at a gas station. I used to think the scariest thing I'd see was a drunk customer. I was wrong. I didn't live there anymore by the time this happened, but that job trained me to stay alert at night. I learned how silence can feel heavy and how shadows look different when you're tired. Years later, those instincts came back in a way I wasn't ready for. This story takes place in my third-floor apartment in a secured building, right in Koreatown. It's the kind of place with key fobs, security doors, and cameras everywhere, so I always thought I was safe. At the time, I lived with a roommate named Chris. He traveled a lot for work, and one Friday afternoon he packed a bag and told me he'd be gone all weekend. I didn't mind being alone, especially since we had a doorbell camera and sensors on both doors. Chris liked smart home stuff, and he'd set the whole system up himself. I trusted it more than I probably should have. That Friday night was normal. I ordered takeout, watched TV, and tried to enjoy the quiet. Around midnight, I locked the doors, checked that the camera app was working, and went to bed. The city noise outside was the usual mix of traffic and distant sirens. Nothing felt off when I fell asleep. The first alert woke me up from a deep sleep. My phone buzzed hard against the nightstand, the screen lighting up the room. It said there was motion detected at the front door. The time on my phone read 2:13 a.m., which instantly put me on edge. I opened the live view, expecting to see someone drunk or lost in the hallway, but the screen was empty. I told myself it was probably a glitch. The building was old, and sometimes lights in the hallway flickered. I closed the app and tried to calm my breathing. Just as I was about to put my phone down, another alert popped up. This one made my stomach drop. It said, "Person detected, back door." The back door led to a small emergency stairwell that was supposed to be locked from the outside. Almost no one used it. I tapped the notification with shaking fingers. The live feed loaded slowly, then showed the dim view of the back hallway. It looked empty too, but I could hear something faint through my phone speaker. It sounded like breathing, slow and close to the microphone. Before I could process that, I heard the notification sound again. This time it didn't come from my phone. It came from inside my apartment. I froze in bed, staring at the dark doorway to my bedroom. The chime played again, clear and sharp, like it was coming from the living room. I hadn't left any other devices on. My tablet was off and the TV was dark. That sound should only come from my phone. I slowly got out of bed and grabbed a heavy flashlight from my nightstand. Every step toward the bedroom door felt too loud. I stood there for a few seconds, listening. The apartment was quiet, but not the comfortable kind of quiet. It felt like something was holding its breath. When I opened the door, the living room was empty. The front door was locked and the deadbolt was still in place. I checked the kitchen, the bathroom, even the closet. Nothing was out of place. No open windows, no signs of anyone inside. I kept expecting to see someone standing there, but I didn't. Trying to think logically, I told myself the sound must have come from my phone after all. Maybe it echoed weirdly in the room. I went back to bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening for anything unusual. Around 3:40 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Another alert, motion detected at the front door. I didn't even want to open the app, but I did. This time, the camera showed something different. The hallway light was on, and I could see a shape close to the lens. It looked like the side of someone's head, just barely in frame. Before I could zoom in, the feed cut out. The screen went black and displayed an error message. My Wi-Fi was still working and my phone signal was fine, only the camera feed was down. That was when I decided to call the police. I told the dispatcher about the alerts, the sound, and the camera cutting out. She sounded calm, almost bored, and said officers would come check the building. While I waited, I sat on my bed with the flashlight pointed at the door, my heart pounding. The officers arrived about 20 minutes later. They checked the hallways and the stairwell, but found nothing. One of them suggested it was probably a software bug or a delayed notification. He even smiled a little when he said it. I didn't feel better at all. After they left, I stayed awake until the sun came up. In the morning light, everything looked normal again. I almost convinced myself I'd overreacted. Almost. Later that day, I opened the camera app to review the footage from the night before. Most of the clips were empty hallways, just like I expected. Then I found one from the back door alert. The video was only a few seconds long. At first, I thought it was blank, then I noticed movement. Someone was standing just out of full view, close enough that the camera couldn't focus. I could see part of an eye, wide and unblinking, staring straight into the lens. The clip ended abruptly, like it had been cut. I felt sick. I checked the system logs, something Chris had shown me how to do once. That's when I noticed something else that didn't make sense. The alert sounds had been triggered from inside the apartment. According to the log, the system thought the notification speaker was active in the living room at that exact moment. I didn't have a notification speaker in the living room. When Chris got back Sunday night, I told him everything. He laughed at first, thinking I was messing with him, until I showed him the footage and the logs. His face changed when he saw them. He admitted he'd been having weird issues with the system too, like settings changing on their own. That night, we decided to turn everything off. We unplugged the cameras, disabled the sensors, and even shut down the router. The apartment felt quieter than ever, but not in a good way. It felt exposed. Around 2 a.m. that night, we heard a familiar sound. The doorbell chime echoed through the apartment. We both looked at each other in silence. The system was unplugged. There was no power to it at all. The chime played again, slower this time, like it was being dragged out. Then we heard something else, a soft knock at the back door. We didn't answer it, we didn't move. We just sat there listening as the knocking continued, steady and patient, until it finally stopped. We never heard footsteps walking away. We moved out a month later. The building management said there were no issues with the security system and no reports from other tenants. Sometimes, late at night, my phone still lights up with a notification sound that shouldn't exist anymore. And every time it does, I can't help but wonder if something is still watching, just waiting for me to open the door.